TownTalk. With me today, Town Manager for a community update. Mr. Ells, it's been a long time since we've seen you in the studio.
Seems like years. It probably has been.
It probably has been. Your community updates through the COVID pandemic were greatly appreciated by our audience out there and our residents. We're bringing you back today at TownTalk to talk a little bit about the 3 wind projects that are going on in the town of Barnstable. Some misinformation out there, some misunderstanding. What's the scoop here? What are these 3 projects? Let's start with there. There's 3 projects, all with different names.
There are, and it is confusing, and there is inaccurate information out there. So the first phase is called Vineyard Wind, and that's the cable that is currently landing at Commonwealth Beach. They've gone through their permitting, received all their approvals, worked with the town to create a host community agreement, and we can talk about that a little bit later, and are now out there installing cable. They're putting conduit in the roadways. They have a barge right now off of Commonwealth Beach, and I believe they're pulling cable to ultimately go into the concrete boxes that are in the parking lot of Commonwealth Beach. Second phase is called Park City Wind, which is landing at the west end of Craigville Beach. That project is still in permitting, and the project is still in permitting, and we have a host community agreement, again, relevant to that project. They still have state permitting, county permitting, and local permitting to go. The third project is Commonwealth Wind, and that's proposed to land at Dowses Beach. They are in permitting as well, but they are in more preliminary permitting. The Park City Wind, which is Craigville, is much further along. We do not have a host community agreement for the third phase, and basically they are out doing very preliminary work, soil borings, to see whether what they are considering permitting, designing, and from their standpoint, hopefully constructing, is feasible along the routes that they've selected. So those are the 3 projects, and that's a general status of where each of them are at.
Okay. You used the word permitting multiple times in explaining these 3 projects. I think there, again, some misinformation or misunderstanding of what control the town has over this process. So the permitting process starts at the federal level and then works its way down. So give residents an understanding of how that works and what kind of control that the town might have in that process, or do they have any purview at all?
Well, that's a complicated question.
Isn't it?
It involves everybody.
Right.
But it really starts with the award of what they call a grant area, which was southeast of Martha's Vineyard. And so this entity that comprises, in a partnership, the first phase and the second 2 phases got that grant area. So they can erect wind turbines out in the ocean, southeast of Martha's Vineyard, not in the Sound, not this side, on the other side. And then they run a cable, and then they land a cable, and then they go through the land side of installation. Now, the permitting process starts with the federal government and then moves through the federal government to the state government, multiple agencies, and then locally, both Cape Cod Commission, because all of these projects will trigger developments of regional concern, DRIs, and then ultimately they typically go before they'll go before conservation locally. They will go to Public Works, not in a hearing, but certainly to secure road cut permits, for example. But to your point, the authority over these projects, and this might be one of the most confusing aspects of this, really falls with state government within one of the agencies called the Energy Facility Siting Board.
Okay.
And the first project has gone through and received approval there. The second one is in the process of receiving approvals there, though they're pretty much through that process. And the third has not even filed with that state agency yet. All of them, each of these steps, have different types of opportunity for the public to comment. And all I can say, and I keep saying this to our public, please comment. Now I can imagine that a homeowner along any of the, in town, doesn't matter where you live, might say, I don't do this, I don't know how to comment. I completely understand. We are reviewing these as they progress. We will make comment as they progress. But every comment matters. So if you feel as though you can comment, try to follow this. If you can't find it, call us and ask. We'll help you. To the credit of the first project and certainly into this second project, second phase, the first project, the Vineyard Wind project, held over 70 public meetings. They had a very accessible website, so you could find step by step where they were and how to comment. For the second phase, they're doing the same. For the third phase, they're in the process of doing that. So, but the real authority doesn't fall with the town to say yes or no, even though it's important that we comment.
Right.
The authority falls with this Energy Facility Siting Board to give this a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Now, the other thing I would say to the public is that just go online and Google federal policy on this issue, Commonwealth, Massachusetts policy on this issue, and what's planned. A lot of people don't even know how the East Coast is prioritized for this to occur. And from the coast of Maine all the way down south along the coastline, this is going to occur. It's just happening here first because the feds awarded that grant area.
Right.
So I say this to people because, okay, if the agency that holds the real authority over this is under the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it certainly isn't coming in here with, they want to hear it. They're looking for this to occur in Massachusetts. And obviously for phase one, Vineyard Wind, it did. So it's really important. A lot of times our public will be very frustrated and say, just say no. And that's not the challenge that's before us. The challenge is to make sure that we protect the town of Barnstable and the very sensitive environment of Cape Cod, and that we responsibly respond as they progress through this permitting. Environmental and regulatory type permitting is typically where we get most involved, though we do look at, and there's a lot of focus right now on like the Department of Public Utilities and some of the requests they're making now relevant to the financing of this, though we actually have a lot less authority there, but again, every comment matters. So that's kind of a general outline of how this proceeds.
But that was a really great explanation for people to delineate the process. And, we have questions through, certain resident groups and village associations is, well, what is the purview of the town manager? And you mentioned community host agreements. So give us a sense of what your purview is over the project, and when does that host agreement get triggered into this process?
So that's a really good question, and I get asked it fairly frequently. There isn't any prescribed process. So there isn't like you look at a regulation or something or a statute or whatever, and it says this is how you do it. So then you almost go to the end and you back up to wherever you are in the process. And for the so that's what we did. And I'll jump back to the original Vineyard Wind project and the original filings with the Bureau of Energy, the Ocean Energy Management, BOEM. And they had Yarmouth as the primary landing and Barnstable as a secondary landing. And that's really when I heard about the first Vineyard Wind project in detail. I had read about it the same as everybody else, but they're not coming to us and explaining all these details. Right. And quite honestly, the authority doesn't fall with us to approve it or not approve it. So they're very much focused on the federal and state government approvals. And our town council came to us as we began to watch the primary landing location, which was Yarmouth back then. And the town council said to me, why don't you go and have a discussion with Vineyard Wind about making the primary landing Barnstable? And I said, okay, so you want me to do this? And they said, yes, we want you to proceed. So then that began I always look at the charter, I look at the authority that the town manager has relevant to these issues in your question. And I said, okay, for us to enter into a host community agreement, I'm ultimately going to have to go back to town council and ask for authority to do that. And why do you do a host community agreement? It is so that you can get in there right away. And a lot of people have said, say no to the host community agreement because you're saying yes to the project by doing that. No, you're not. No, you're not.
No, because the permitting is already
the
happening.
Permitting,
and
right.
the project is going to happen regardless of a host agreement.
Very well could.
Right.
Now, is it easier if we support it? Have come to a host community agreement? Yes, of course. On the other side, if they get all the way through their permitting and we haven't asked for everything that's important to Barnstable and they get all their permits, why are they going to do anything other than pay the fees that are associated with a road cut permit and pay the personal property tax as a result of installing an asset in the town of Barnstable? Why would they do things like far exceed the regulatory requirements for a substation in the containment of a substation that we required in the first host community agreement? Why would they coincide their construction project with our upgrade and installation of new utilities like sewer, water, drainage? Why would they give us brand new roads rather than just put an overlay on it? We can go through this, but these are all the sort. Why would they pay us a significant amount of money for a host community agreement? Well, they wouldn't. So you have to jump to the end and then come back to how do we proceed. Now, why did we choose the process that we've chose, which is really, in my mind, a three-step process? Bring a proposal to council and say, do you want to consider a host community agreement? In all three projects, the answer was yes. Next, ask town council for approval to negotiate a host community agreement. As of last council meeting, all three projects, yes. Okay. Then ultimately, I bring back that negotiated host agreement and review it in executive session with council, and then ask for their permission to sign into that agreement, which is required because of the duration of agreement. If it's more than a certain number of years, then you have to do that, and they have to say yes. I haven't received that on this phase 3. Okay. Phase 1 and 2 we have. And so, in a nutshell, that's what this host community agreement process is. They're each different. I mean, the first Vineyard Wind was very much focused on making sure that nobody could interconnect into the cable, that they're running from that grant area to the shore and therefore add more than we agreed to. It was focused on groundwater protection. once it came landside, especially with the substation. And that's a whole nother discussion you should have with our attorney, and we brought in third-party experts so that we could make sure we protected groundwater from substations and from any sort of asset that's installed, even the cable itself, because there's certain cables that are solid and certain cables that aren't, and so what is not solid in it, and if that gets into the environment, what might be the impacts of that. So then more routine construction-related items about the quality and you know, the coordination of impacts in our roadways. So, but when you get into a Centerville, let's say, versus a residential, which is basically the areas you go through from Koval's heading north, in Centerville, you're going to have to go through a little Main Street with commercial and sidewalks and aesthetics. That's included. If it ever goes, and I don't know the final route, I know that one of the two routes would be through Main Street, Osterville area. Certainly, you've got an active commercial village, very unique, that needs to be contemplated. It can't just be the regulators from the state approve this, and it doesn't take into full consideration every aspect of impact. And so that's what we will try to achieve. I can tell you with the first two, it took years. So this isn't there's a template and you sign it and you move on. And it isn't always in agreement because I don't represent a proponent. I represent the town of Barnstable in this. And we're trying to make sure as best we can, we get from the project what we need.
Right. And that brings up a point, as you know, we've talked about permitting, we've talked about host agreements and what our purview is. There's barges off of our waters.
Yes.
There's soil borings. There have been some that construction started, but that's not true. So we have a barge off of Douses at this point in time. They got there last night. What's going on?
They're doing borings, soil borings, preliminary investigation.
Right.
So either they came to us when they come shoreside, or they've got whatever approvals would be required from whatever the appropriate agency outside of us.
Right.
And they're drilling holes and they're taking samples, and then they'll decide whether they can do preliminarily what they would like to do there. It's not the commencement of construction or installation of anything. So somebody said, well, just say no to that. Do you know what they would do? They would go to the Energy Facility Siting Board, the state, and say, they said no, and they have the authority to supersede us. Right. And then they would proceed. So, and this is standard. We get asked this by utilities all the time. Right. And it isn't a matter of are we supportive or not. It's preliminary investigation. So we do it. We do it before a construction project on our own roads.
Right.
We go out,
for
we
all
drill
the sewer
borings.
expansion.
We do it for road to understand what's underlying our roadways. So.
Excellent.
Yep.
And I think the last piece, this was really great to help residents understand the projects themselves, the three of them. There's not just one, there's three. And the whole understanding of where the town fits into that process. So the next question residents always have, and you just touch on this a little bit, is how can they make their voices heard in this process? You touched a little bit about trying to make public comments. So do you have some advice? I mean, I know that Commonwealth Wind and Park City Wind have both set up lots of outreach meetings over the next few weeks, months. They're into January, I think, with some of their meetings. How can residents make their voice heard?
It's confusing when you have so many agencies and when you can't just turn to the town with a comment that's kind of a standing comment. So number one, it is confusing. I think that you can certainly ask us to help you identify when those opportunities come. The proponents are responsible, and they have identified it. You can certainly go back and look at what Park City and Vineyard Wind did in communicating to the public. But to very specifically, right now, there is a filing under the Mass Environmental Protection Act for the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs in Massachusetts with an environmental notification form to really scope out what the next environmental review step is, which will be Commonwealth Wind, the Phase 3 Dowses Beach proposal to go through an environmental impact report. So, right now, we're in it, is the comment period. Okay. There's I don't even know if it's called a public hearing. It is a site visit by MEPA on, I think, the 14th and 15th.
Okay.
And I know they're holding one of their meetings over at the Osterville Library.
Correct.
And then comments are due by the 29th, November 29th. It is really important for any and every entity to comment on this. We are commenting on it. And we won't have a host agreement in place, so, but we're going to go in and we're going to comment in every applicable area. It's really important that everybody do it. I'd also say to our anybody that's out there that wants to comment, if you have time to go into the ENF and you go into, I always tell everybody, look at Appendix D, because that outlines all the regulatory agencies that are involved. But I think it's just before. I don't think it's after. It lists all the people who got the ENF. You may want to copy them as well.
Okay.
Either way, supportive or not, the environmental notification form.
There you go.
You may want to copy, like when you look at all the state agencies, you may want to copy certain ones, especially like, for example, if you're concerned about birds. And let's say, there's many things you may be concerned about, environmental issues, but habitat issues. You may want to send your comments to Mass Heritage and other agencies, Audubon, any of them, so that they also know. And again, people will say, well, you just say yes to this. That's not this process at all. It really isn't. And I don't know why our residents believe that. Even when I say to them that's not the process, they'll look at me and just say, well, yes, you're saying yes. I said, no, we're not. But we may not have the authority to say no.
Right.
And so we have to prepare for that.
Excellent. Really, really informative. I think it will help folks kind of in their own minds understand the process and make some public comment. Now is the time to do that. Is there any question that I didn't ask that you want residents to have some information?
Only that those who, I did the Net Zero conference, and it was a pretty big conference last Friday, to share our experience. And it was interesting because those who participate in that are very interested in seeing this sort of effort to address climate change occur. And I got all these emails from people saying, thank you. We didn't know Barnstable was even doing this. I've lived here. And so I think that we need to hear from everybody. And we need to engage our students better, because I would have to say almost unanimously when we talk with them about our future, and that's what this discussion really is, about our future. They never say to me, like with wastewater, they never say to me, why are you doing this? This is going to be an inconvenience. I don't want to. They say to me, why haven't you done this yet?
Right.
So whether it's climate change, whether it's environmental protection, we need to engage. We need to engage our youth, absolutely, because it's their future that we're managing.
We're custodians of it right now.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's good to talk.
Thank you for watching Town Talk.